This was initially published in the Cornhill magazine in 1867 in the form of an article under the heading Culture and its Enemies, which was followed by 5 more articles. These 6 articles were then amalgamated in the form of a book which was called Culture and Anarchy. The second edition was printed in 1875. Arnold revised it and gave a name each to the 6 articles. There are 6 chapters in this book, namely Sweetness and Light, Doing as One Likes, Barbarians, Philistines and Populace, Hebraism and Hellenism, Poro unum est necessarium, Our Liberal Practitioners. Eminent scholar J. Dover Wilson had said that Culture and Anarchy is at once a masterpiece of vivacious prose, a great poet's great defense of poetry, a profoundly religious book, and the finest apology for education in the English language. This is indeed one of the greatest works in English literature. Arnold's intense concern for culture and society finds its most serious and profound expression in this book, Culture and Anarchy. Arnold's conception of culture is inextricably associated with his literary criticism. Throughout his critical writing, we find a distinct articulation of his unwavering interest in culture and society. His essays like Heinrich Heine, The Function of Criticism at the Present Time, The Study of Poetry, Byron, etc., contain the germs of his study of culture and society. It should be inappropriate to read Arnold's cultural criticism separately from his other literary criticism or poetry. Arnold's own words, "Everywhere there is a connection," is applicable to his own works. To quote Dover Wilson again, Dover Wilson said, "He was indeed all of a piece. His essays in criticism cannot be fully appreciated without a study, on the one hand, of the introduction to the popular education on the continent and a French Eton, and on the other of a literature and dogma, while a reading of the poems and the essays in criticism forms the best preparation for the understanding of his educational and religious writings. But the culmination of it all, I do not say the best thing he ever wrote, but certainly his most characteristic utterance, is Culture and Anarchy." Now, Arnold's cultural criticism is a type of literary criticism which is related both to historical and sociological criticism. Arnold is one of the first important English critics to discuss literature from this perspective. Arnold deeply felt that the middle classes of Victorian England, with their mammon worship, their crass materialism, and euphoric complacency about their condition, can never be the proper guardian of literature and a healthy literary legacy. On the other hand, their severe evangelical counterparts excuse me, are insensitive to aesthetic value of literature or to imaginative literature. In this ambience, culture is relegated to a limbo. In this regard, Arnold comments sarcastically, "Our coal," thousands of people were saying, "is the real basis of our national greatness. If our coal runs short, there is an end to the greatness of England." But what is greatness? Culture makes us ask. Greatness is a spiritual condition worthy to excite love, interest, and admiration. If England were swallowed up by the sea tomorrow, which of the two, 100 years hence, would most excite the love, interest, and admiration of mankind? Would most therefore show the evidences of having possessed greatness? The England of the last 20 years, or the England of Elizabeth, of a time of splendid spiritual effort, but when our coal and our industrial operations, depending on coal, were very little developed? Well then, what an unsound habit of mind it must be, which makes us talk of things like coal or iron as constituting the greatness of England, and how salutary a friend is culture, bent on seeing things as they are, and thus dissipating delusions of this kind and fixing standards of perfection that are real. Culture aims at the perfection which is harmonious, perfection in which both beauty and intelligence are present, a perfection which unites the two noblest of things, namely sweetness and light. The man of culture, Arnold, ever aims at sweetness and light, while the man who goes against this is a Philistine. Who is a Philistine? The people who believe most that our greatness and welfare are proved by our being very rich, and who most give their lives and thoughts to becoming rich, are just the very people whom we call Philistines. The cure for this malady of Philistinism, of the gaucherie of materialism, lies in the concept of culture. What Arnold defines is disinterested as a disinterested endeavor to learn and to propagate the best that is known and thought in the world. So I'm repeating, his concept of culture is what Arnold defines as a disinterested endeavor to learn and to propagate the best that is known and thought in the world. Culture, according to Arnold, is a study of perfection. It moves by the force, not merely or primarily of the scientific passion for pure knowledge, but also of the moral and social passion for doing good. All great literatures of all space and time are a storehouse of culture. So Arnold throughout his life incessantly assailed relentlessly the insularity, the egotism, the narrowness and parochialism of the English people. Hence he constantly alludes to other literatures. He insists on the practice of comparative literature. To dispel the miasma of materialism as well as foolish smugness and insalubrious attitude to life, Arnold refers to healthy books where a healthy stance of life can be found. Homer, Sophocles, Epictetus, Senancour, Goethe, Shakespeare, and Milton. The classical literature, chiefly the literatures of the Greeks, are a constant source of Arnold's inspiration, where the ideal sweetness and light can be attained. For example, Arnold in his book Culture and Anarchy notes, and indeed the Greek word euphia, a finely tempered nature, gives exactly the notion of perfection as culture brings us to conceive it, a harmonious perfection. A perfection in which characters of beauty and intelligence are both present, which unites the two noblest of things, as Swift, who of one of the two at any rate had himself all too little, most happily calls them in his Battle of Books, the two noblest of things, sweetness and light. Arnold expresses a sturdy hope about the redeeming power of poetry in his The Study of Poetry. He thought that one day poetry would replace religion and a perfectly capable means of saving the mankind from the spiritual putrefaction. Arnold expresses the same hope here. He thinks that sweetness and light which animate culture is also the spirit of poetry. Arnold writes, in thus making sweetness and light to be characters of perfection, culture is of spirit with poetry, follows one law with poetry. Far more than our freedom, our population, and our industrialism, many amongst us rely upon our religious organizations to save us. I have called religion a yet more important manifestation of human nature than poetry, because it has worked on a broader scale for perfection and with greater masses of men. But the idea of beauty and a human nature perfect on all its sides, which is the dominant idea of poetry, is a true and invaluable idea, though it has not yet had the success that the idea of conquering the obvious faults of our animality and of a human nature perfect on the moral side, which is the dominant idea of religion. Culture and Anarchy is a particular form of literary criticism. David Deitches says that at first sight this kind of preaching might seem very far removed from literary criticism. Arnold himself called Culture and Anarchy an essay in political and social criticism. A whole array of modern critics, notably among them T.S. Eliot, F.R. Lewis, Raymond Williams, are all deeply influenced by Arnold's cultural thinking. F.R. Lewis wrote a book, Culture and Environment, co-authored by Dennis Thompson, which studies the baneful effect of modern industrial condition, of advertising, mass production, and the way in which people live and think amid these clutters, and the response to literature and the arts. The book has a strong impression of Arnoldian legacy, where literature is set in the wider perspective of contemporary culture. Now, there is also another modern parallel of Arnold's culture and anarchy. The modern Marxist critic Raymond Williams' significant book Culture and Society. In this book, Williams closely examines the conception of culture and literature and ideology very much in the Arnoldian line. Williams reveals that culture is intimately connected with art and literature. The complexity of the concept of culture is remarkable, he says. It became a noun of inner process, specialized to its presumed agencies in intellectual life and the arts. It became also a noun of general process, specialized to its resumed configurations in the whole ways of life. Raymond Williams, with acute insight, traces the genealogy of the concept of culture. He places Arnold in a prominent position in the genealogy while tracing the function of the idea of culture, as can be seen in the 19th century articulation of culture as a concept. But Williams occasionally differs with Arnold. While commenting upon the stock notion popularized by Arnold that the possession of wealth narrows down human ideal, Williams says, "I am sorry to dissent, but there is something in the tone which reminds us that Arnold not only popularized the tradition, but brought down on it the continuing charges of priggishness and spiritual pride." In the next lectures, I would like to continue more about the intricate details of the chapters. Please keep watching, like and share.